Hello. This is a little political rant. It's unusual for me. You haven't seen my political side yet, but there is a big one. And it's in defence of the Pope. Now, I am not a happy-clappy Christian. I am not a happy-clappy Christian. If you're Christian, that's fine. Whatever you are, you get on with your own business. Not religious, but I do think the Pope needs to be stood up for. And whether he was in the Hitler Youth, and whether the Vatican has got lots of Nazi gold bullion or not, is by the by. In this situation, I do think someone needs to stand up for the Pope. Because at the end of the day, if what he was saying in his speech was that Islam is, following from its texts, is a violent and aggressive religion, well, there is a case for that argument, as illiberal as that may sound. I mean, when you open the Quran and read, "Make war on the unbelievers and the hypocrites, and deal rigorously with them, hell shall be their home, an evil fate," you do sort of wonder how peaceful and non-crusading and the rest of it Islam actually is. And it's compounded somewhat, this sort of view that Islam might be not exactly the most sociable of religions, in the reaction that we've seen in some Muslim countries to these comments by the Pope. The burning of churches in Palestine, for example. In Britain, people protesting outside of Westminster Catholic Cathedral, threatening to behead the Pope. Or in Somalia, Muslims gunning down a nun, a 65-year-old nun. I mean, I do think that these reactions are slightly disproportionate and don't really go very far towards proving that Islam is that peace-loving. And indeed, one may say that these are the reactions of extremists of that cases, but I don't see, frankly, the moderates in the Islamic world distancing themselves from these reactions. In fact, their focus seems to be still on the comments of the Pope and how contrite or not his apology was. And at the end of the day, we need to get some perspective, you know. The Pope was quoting a 14th century Roman emperor in some vague speech in Germany, and the reaction has been to shoot nuns, burn down churches, and threaten to behead him. Doesn't sound very proportional to me. And then one has to think, shouldn't the Muslim world be focusing more on the urgent problems on its own doorstep? For example, in the Sudan, where the Arab government is perpetrating the worst genocide of the 21st century. But it seems that when the West isn't involved, when, you know, it's just a purely internal affair, not really interested in getting their moral high horses. It's not really much fun for them. Now, of course, we're then accused, we in the West are accused of actually being covert or overt religious crusaders ourselves. You know, the Iraq War and the war in Afghanistan, they're all just ways of spreading Christianity in the Middle East. I mean, frankly, I find that the most ludicrous argument I've ever heard. You can justify the Iraq War for many reasons, and some of them are not very noble at all. And quite frankly, I would have preferred our government not to have gone into Iraq and spent the money they've wasted there on our National Health Service and let the Arab world and the Muslim world and the Middle East deal with their own problems and their own screwed up governments. But now that we are involved, one should focus on who is actually blowing up whom. It is Muslim blowing up Muslim in Iraq. And in Afghanistan, it is a allied force made up of many, many nations resisting a rebel force that would have Afghanistan back back in the Dark Ages. I mean, the Taliban. If anyone can actually, in good conscience, defend the Taliban, I would really be interested to hear, because I just don't see how it's possible. Now, of course, probably I'm being a very naive, a puppet of the British and American governments, you know, me, my little privileged white life in London. Not that privileged, actually, but never mind. I would make it clear that I am not a supporter of Tony Blair. I didn't like him in 1997 when he was elected. I did not vote for him. I've never liked him. I hate him. And I think George W. Bush is quite possibly the only person I can think who's worse than Tony Blair. I mean, at least Tony Blair is vaguely statesmanlike. George Bush is a monkey. I mean, a monkey. But even in the hands of these men, I have more faith. I am happier, let's say, that the superpowers, the world powers now, are countries like the United States. Even in spite of the fact that it's run by an absolute twat, I would dread to think what would be the case if the global superpowers were Afghanistan and Iran. Especially if they were intent on putting into practice some of those passages in the Quran. Then we might really see what a crusade is about, what interfering in other countries' businesses is about. Yes. Well, that wasn't very articulate, but it was a bit of a rant. But I think the kernels were there of a very good argument. And maybe I'll tinkle with it. Tinkle or tinker? I'll tinker with it later to make it into a bit of a more well-rounded and watertight discourse. But I think I've made some valid points. No doubt now I'm going to be beheaded. But you know, there we are. That's the price you have to pay for freedom of speech, it would appear, in the modern world. Bye!